A week ago, I had the privilege of leading a short solidarity mission to Israel with a wonderful group from our community and others who joined us as well. Now, a friend asked me to bring a small package. And, you like to help out. So, of course, I took the package and brought it to Israel. And it was going to be picked up by a relative and given to the one who needed it. And so I took the package, found a little small gift bag in my room, put it in there, brought it down to the front desk, explained to them it was very important. They needed to make sure everything was going to be fine. They said, no problem. I said, it's for the Cohen family. Make sure when they come by tomorrow that you give it to them. Everything was fine. Next morning, we went down to the south. We were volunteering on a farm, which had lost almost all of its workers. And if you've ever planted melon seedlings, it's not as easy as you think. The farmer was upset. We didn't finish our rows. Apparently, we'll have to go back next week and finish. In the middle of this, my hands are full of mud, and I get a phone call. And like you're trying to get the phone and not get it all muddy. Hello? What do you mean the package isn't there? I left it at the front desk. It's nowhere to be found. You know what? Ezra, my wonderful friend and tour guide here, you take the phone, sort this out. Everything will be fine. Ezra comes back a few minutes later. The package is nowhere to be found. Disappointed, but we have to go on with our day in the south. And we come back to the hotel. We see a night clerk just sitting there. Did you happen to see a little black bag with a little package I left here? No, all right, I didn't see anything. We're like, can you like get up and look or something? Whatever. Finally, gets up and looks around. No bag. Next morning, the same thing. No bag. Kind of give up. Sitting with some friends at lunch. She says, "It's no problem. I'm a big problem solver. Just tell me what it is. I'll order it from Amazon. It'll be at my sister's house in like 2 hours. She'll bring it to Israel. She's coming in 2 days. Everything's taken care of." Sure enough, we get back to the hotel that night, and the hotel manager, Oded, greets us, and he's very apologetic, and he said, I gave the package to the Cohen family. I said, but it's not true. I spoke to them on the phone. They never received it. He said, right when they checked in, I handed them the bag. That's not the right Cohen family. Turns out Cohen is kind of a popular name in Israel. I don't know what this family was thinking when they got this little bag with the package with my little note in it, but they clearly just took it. Eventually, we got it back. Now, this mix-up, to me, was symbolic of some of the situation that we found in Israel. It's a country that is experiencing confusion. It's a country that has been shaken to the core since the events of October 7th. As we toured around the country, we heard testimony from survivors. Oshrit, a woman from Kibbutz Nachal Oz, who told us her story and how they suffered terribly. Re'uma, a mother from Kibbutz Be'eri, which experienced unbelievable devastation, shared with us the story of what took place that day to her and her family. She lost her 16-year-old son, Lior. Her daughter, 13, was taken hostage. And thankfully, she was returned 2 months later in the hostage swap that took place then. We listened to Nehorai, a young man who was at the Nova Music Festival. He told us an unbelievable story of perseverance and strength and luck as he ran and ran from the Hamas terrorists, and he survived. We listened to their stories. We hugged them. We cried with them. Those hugs were not just from us, but I felt like we were bringing them from everyone in our community. We held space for them to share their trauma. It was hard. It was painful, and it was pretty intense. But I have to say, it was also incredibly meaningful. They told us that our presence made them feel a little bit less alone. So today, as we heard earlier, is Shabbat Parah, which is just a great name. Shabbat of the cow. Who would think we had a Shabbat of the cow? You know, I know the Chinese mythology has a year of the ox, but we get a Shabbat of the cow. I mean, more specifically, the Shabbat of the red heifer, certain type of cow. And as Rabbi Kling-Perkins introduced it, it's the third of the 4 Shabbatot leading into Pesach. Pesach, Passover, is a big deal in the tradition, and the rabbis wanted to make sure we were prepared. We were ready for this festival. And so, after they lost many of the traditions, like the pilgrimage to the temple in Jerusalem, the sacrifice of the lamb, and that amazing barbecue for those of you who eat meat, after the temple's destroyed, those rituals are over. And so, they took this ritual, which is a very strange ritual. It was to take a red heifer, which apparently is very hard to find. I don't know if anyone's seen a red cow around. Yeah, no, it's very unlikely. It has to have no blemish, no defect, a perfect red cow. They would offer it as a sacrifice, mix its ashes with water, and sprinkle it on anyone who was impure, anyone who had come in contact with a dead body, so that they would be prepared for Passover and they could take place in the rituals. Now, once the temple's destroyed, the rabbis pivot and they say, we can't perform these rituals, but we are going to learn about them. We are going to read them, which Susan just did, all 22 verses so beautifully, all about this very bizarre ritual. Now, this ancient practice, tameh, would become impure and would need healing themselves. Now, many people have tried to explain it. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, one of the greatest sages who lived at the time of the destruction of the temple, in the Midrash he teaches, quote, "It is not the dead that defiles, nor the water that purifies, but it's God who says, I've laid down a statute, a chukah. I've issued a decree, and you can't transgress it. As is written, this is chukat Torah, this is the law of the Torah, what God has commanded." And what he's saying is, in other words, I have no idea what this means. I don't have a clue, but you got to do it. Now, that's always not sufficient for me. Dr. Barry Holtz, a Jewish educator, references the French anthropologist Claude Lévi-Strauss and the historian Mircea Eliade, who teach about the oppositional pairs that exist in many cultures, right? Pure and impure, tameh and tahor. And he writes, purifying waters that also defile fit into a pattern that begins to make sense, right? He's saying this strange mixture that can make someone pure and impure fits into a category. And he says the following: cultures seem to gravitate towards oppositional figures. These figures or ideas help us make sense of the world. We distinguish between the raw and the cooked, the forces of light and the forces of darkness. We humans are comfortable in those precise categories. But when things are on the edges, when they cross borders, we are less certain. Anthropologists refer to this as the crisis or confusion around liminality, the threshold or the boundary, when you're neither here nor there. And throughout history, we've built rituals, not just in Judaism, but all civilizations, to help deal with those boundary places. Think about the mezuzah that we put up on the doorpost with the mini scroll of Torah, right? That helps us cross the boundary, helps us stave off the confusion of the boundary. He concludes, of all the borders, none is so frightening as the border between life and death. The individual has come in contact with the dead body. That person has touched a border that none of us wish to cross. They are between two polarities of life and death. And throughout human history, it is the rituals that help us navigate and negotiate between those boundaries. Now, bringing it back to the ritual, this most bizarre and mysterious ritual reminds us that people who experience death, who experience deep, deep trauma, they, of course, are in need of healing. And those who work with them, in essence, also experience a trauma of a different sort. They experience listening to these stories, and that can also be challenging to the listener, who's also brought into the pain of the one who was directly impacted. And thus, both groups need rituals to help them heal. Think about when we leave a cemetery in Judaism. There's a custom to pour a little bit of water over your hands. Sometimes you'll see the water when you return to the house of mourning. And maybe originally it was to perform some kind of hygienic purpose, so you would be cleaned after that experience. But it became a spiritual practice to think about, I was in one state and one place and one experience, and now I'm returning, in essence, to life in a more normal sense, to move to another realm. All of this brings us to this moment. The events of October 7th deeply traumatized those who experienced them directly. I would argue that it traumatized all Israelis, and in fact, all Jews around the whole globe. Now, traveling to Israel to hear their stories allowed those people to share a little bit of their pain, opening a little bit of a window into their experience. Hopefully, as we heard them, we provided maybe even some measure of healing, or at the very least, the knowledge that they are not alone, that we're thinking about them. The awareness that our group, that in fact our community, stands with them. We also learned these incredible stories of hope. How when the government failed, Israeli civil society immediately organized and started to take care of each other within hours. They had organized through WhatsApp groups rides for people who needed to be evacuated from the south. They had clothes and food waiting for them. Those who needed to be relocated had a place. And over the weeks after these events, they provided everything these people needed, including the therapy to begin to heal. We then went to Tel Aviv, and we saw really powerful works of art that street artists had put up on the walls of buildings. These were to help them cope with the tragedies. We saw poetry written on the walls. We visited families from the north who had been evacuated. They hadn't been in their homes because of the anti-tank missiles that destroyed their homes. One woman pulled out her cell phone to show me her destroyed apartments. We did something very special. We brought not only toys to the kids there, but handmade little Magen David, Stars of David, that said, "Made with love from Temple Amunah." They were symbols of the love that we hold for them. In so many places, they told us how much they appreciated our visit and those of others who were coming during this most terrible time. Whether it was families whose relatives are still being held hostage, families who lost loved ones on October 7th and in its aftermath, families whose children are serving in Gaza, everyone said the same thing. Thank you for coming. Every group. The families we served the families that we visited with from the displaced villages on the north, the soldiers to whom we served dinner on their base, even Benny Gantz, the third in command of all of Israel. He was not in the government because he's from a more liberal centrist party, but he was brought in to represent more in Israel during this most difficult time, most fraught time. We went into a shawarma restaurant in Sderot, and there he's just sitting there with a couple of advisors having lunch. Israel's that kind of country. And he got up and gave a little impromptu speech about how much it meant to him and to Israel that we were there. It was hard to take in all of this pain, but there was also this undercurrent of hope. Their perseverance, their commitment to one another, and their ability to share these stories was really inspiring. It felt that people could heal from this trauma, even if it may take years. When we volunteered, even though I have to say I wasn't so good at it, when we volunteered, it felt like we were engaged in some healing of our wounded family. I want to take us back to this strange ritual of the red heifer. To me, when I think about it, the most important part was actually the person involved in it. Just think about what they did. According to the Torah, they were supposed to go over and pick some twigs of a hyssop plant. This is not a hyssop plant, but it has the same kind of flowers, purple and pink. They were supposed to take those twigs, dip them in this strange mixture, and place it over the head, sprinkling the water above the person who experienced this trauma and needed this healing. I like to think that they did it with love. I like to think that there was a sense of compassion in their eyes, a kindness in their hearts. That person's healing presence, their touch, their compassion may have been the balm that traumatized person needed. As we gather, we continue to pray for peace for all the people of Israel and Gaza. We pray that the terrible humanitarian suffering that has taken place will end and be alleviated. We pray for peace. And as we pray for the safe return of our hostages, let us hold on to a message of hope, as all of these people somehow found the strength to do. Just as the ancient Israelites were able to cope with trauma through that ritual and through kindness, I pray that we are able to find ways to share our love with our family who are in need. May this ritual remind us that healing and hope are always possible. Shabbat Shalom.